As you may know, I have sparsely mentioned it on this channel before, I'm autistic. This means that I have special interests. Basically, I put way more focus into something than the average person does in their normal interests, for lack of a better word. One of them is CarQuest, one is Christianity, which expands into mythology, psychology, and philosophy, but one big one I barely highlighted on this channel is Sonic the Hedgehog. I made a gameplay video where I played Adventure, Lost World, and Adventure 2 of all games, and then a video essay about the meaning of life and how it relates to Sonic, but I've never just talked about Sonic. The thing about my relationship to Sonic is it's strange. I don't like a good portion of the games. I haven't seen a lot of the media around it, like Prime or the Archie comics, but I know way too much about them. I don't like a lot of the games that most people like, but I love a lot of the games that most people hate. For instance, Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Generations are a couple of my least favorite Sonic games, but I love Shadow the Hedgehog, Sonic Heroes, and Sonic 06. The thing about that, though, is I also haven't beaten a lot of Sonic games. I haven't beaten any of the classics 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, CD, the Advanced Games, Adventure 2, Rush, Unleashed, and I want that to change. It might take a while, but I do want to play every Sonic game. Instead of doing it in order, though, because my ADHD would kill me if I was forced to play the classic games all back to back, I'm just going to do it in whatever order I feel like, in whatever time frame I feel like, starting with Sonic Adventure 2 right now. I have played this game before, as I mentioned, but I certainly haven't beaten it. I made it to Eggman's desert level at least, and to Pumpkin Hill. I may have made it past that, but I don't remember anything else for the life of me. I'm positive you already know the story of this game before watching a video like this, and it's honestly not too important to this, but if anything sticks out, I'll be sure to mention it along the way, with any ancillary information needed to understand it, just in case. Aside of that, I'm not sure if I'll structure this more like a retrospective or a review. I suppose I'll just go with it. I know technically the Dark story is first chronologically, but I'm going to start with the Hero story for no particular reason. City Escape has been talked about to death and back, but mostly positively. Don't get me wrong, this is a good level, it's fun, it has good music, it's a great introduction to the game, and has plenty of routes through the level with the fast but dangerous and slow but safe motif. But I'm actually going to go against the grain with this one. The boarding section at the beginning of the level, while cool, is mind-numbingly boring aside from the spectacle. It's also weird that it starts off with boarding, as it really doesn't come back in the game, and doesn't have much to do with anything else at all, really. The truck segment is similar in my eyes. It's boring and easy aside from the spectacle. You just hold it down. There are ramps and rings, but it's impossible to react to them because of how close you are to the screen, so you just have to know that they're there. This is fine for a game with a ranking system, but the ramps don't really do much for that either. The whole segment is just kind of annoying. The boss doesn't do the game any favors either, since you just jump off the crates and homing attack it a few times. If all the crates break, you kinda just sit there until it decides to come down, and then you attack it. And most of the crates are outside of the playable area anyway. The overlapping voices in the cutscenes are hilarious and add to the game. I will not be docking points for that. The first Knuckles stage is a great introduction to his gameplay. It's small and simple with a few narrow paths, showing you exactly what you need to do. The radar only tracking one emerald at a time sucks, but other than that, this stage is great. I like the gameplay style, it's fun, a lot more fun than the mech stages anyway. Plus, Knuckles' music is always good, and a lot of fun to listen to. The first Eggman fight as Tails sucks. You can just mash the attack button and win. There's nothing to it, and it does a terrible job of introducing the gameplay style. The stage is really boring, and these stages are the primary reason I haven't actually finished the game yet. You're just standing around looking for enemies to target. That's the whole thing. Enemies frequently drop from the ceiling on top of you if you're trying to go fast, the whole point of a Sonic game, and it just feels like Tails is so much less capable compared to the first game because of the mech. It's slow, boring, repetitive, and easy. Luckily, it's followed by a really fun Sonic stage that introduces the Lightspeed Dash, allowing you to quickly follow a trail of rings, but it's highly situational, as fun as it is to zip around. The rest of Middle Harbor is unsubstantial aside from the boarding section I completely forgot about that is once again boring, annoying, and pointless. Green Forest is alright, it's a little janky, but I love Sonic Adventure 1 for its jankiness, so I really can't hold it against it. I'm just not used to this game's jank. The time limit is a little too forgiving, but I'm also a 21-year-old playing a kid's game, so maybe that's unfair. The Lightspeed Dash is almost useless in this level because it barely works on random strings of rings for whatever reason, but this level's alright. I took a break at the Chow Garden and got rid of all my tubes and animals while I was there, all in one Chow. I've heard some say that the Chow Garden is the best part of the game, so I'll do my best to get invested. Now it's time for Pumpkin Hill, hell yeah! Pumpkin Hill is the second Knuckles stage, and consequently my favorite. It has a lot of verticality allowing for the full use of Knuckles' moveset, as well as there being plenty of places for the emerald pieces to hide rather than 3 tiny paths. The music is great, the theming is great, if strange, and the level design is great. This may be my favorite stage in the game, if not my favorite gameplay style. The next level, however, is a Tails level. It is awful. You got the hover ability, but that's the only good thing about this level. It's long, it's boring, it's unfair, and it's buggy. If you hover next to a wall, you shoot straight down for some reason. I died at the very end of the level because of a falling obstacle and had to replay the whole thing because Tails simply refused to move forward. He said there were falling obstacles, so I was trying to go fast because I was about to die, and then I was completely stopped and killed for doing what the game said. The mines level is alright, it's a little too hard to navigate your first time through in my opinion, but that's kind of the point of Knuckles' gameplay. The breathing underwater power-up is great, but once again, highly situational. The only non-situational power-up so far has been with Tails, which sucks. At least Knuckles and Sonic are fun without any extra moves anyway. Tails just kinda sucks. The bubbling in the mines is infuriatingly annoying, but you only hear it above water. That said, it does happen no matter what if you're not in the water, regardless of how far you are from any of the bubbles. The next Tails stage is actually fun, though my driving wasn't great because I was also eating a Pop-Tart at the time. This will probably end up being the best Tails stage in the game, just because it isn't slow and annoying. All I have to say about the next level is precision platforming with the mech doesn't work. It drops inputs all the time, can't avoid enemies because the hitbox is huge, and there are even enemies that show up on platforms after you've already jumped, so you just have to know that it's there, otherwise you just die. Whoa, a non-situational power-up with a good character? Crazy. The bounce bracelet is really fun, it lets you bounce higher at the cost of your speed. The timer gimmick in this stage doesn't overstay its welcome, and the platforming challenges are an adequate difficulty for this point in the game, and the aesthetic is fun. The only real problem I have with the stage is the ghosts. They just grab you, that's it. There's no real danger, just wasted time. That's not a fun mechanic. The hoops are weird too. They give you a word in the top left, cool, nice, whatever, but they don't actually give you points, so I don't know what's up with that. I really like the aesthetic of the tech and ancient architecture mixed together. It's pretty interesting, but the timer gimmick definitely gets outplayed in the next Knuckles stage. Finding the keys instead of the emeralds is nice though, and the maze-like layout is cool compared to how open the other levels have been. One of my keys was moving around, which was novel, if annoying. The power-up to break the crates is, once again, highly situational too. King Boom Boo is one of the worst boss fights I've ever experienced in a video game. You just run in circles waiting for it to attack, which can take up to a full minute. Hit the hourglass, dig over the shadow, and hit him once. Repeat 4 times and you win. Some of his attacks are unreasonably difficult to avoid. You run faster than him, meaning you have to slow down sometimes, but you have to accelerate to a pretty high speed to avoid some of his attacks. So if you're about to catch up to him, make him turn around, slow down, then he starts his chasing attack, you can't avoid getting hit. He throws the fireballs in a way that's almost impossible to predict, and only being able to hit him once per timer hit is 100% artificial difficulty. This is probably the worst thing in the game so far. The Egg Golem, on the other hand, is pretty good. It's fun to platform on the back of it and it doesn't drag on. It's a little janky of course, but that's to be expected and can definitely be worked around. The attacks are easy to dodge, but that risks falling down, which happened to me a couple times. Homing attacking the top 3 platforms is possible for some reason, not sure why exactly, but it's still a fun boss. The cutscene right afterward is really funny too.
What the? Is everyone alright? We should be landing soon.
The hatch doors are
Don't
open.
sweat it, Knuckles. The only thing in the cargo bay are those
What do you
Master
mean, don't
Emeralds.
sweat it?
Right?
Land the
Knock
shuttle
it
and
off,
let me
Knuckles.
out.
We're gonna crash this thing if you keep that up.
As for the next Tails stage, once again precision platforming does not work. Being able to destroy parts of the level that hinder you is good in concept, but awful in execution since you can't stop the lock on. There are even points where you can destroy a bridge as you're on it, if you're not extremely careful, which just makes the level even slower and more boring. Another incredible Tails stage in the bag, and another situational power-up just for fun. Meteor Herd is the worst Knuckles level. The meteors can hit you out of nowhere, the level is huge but completely open, meaning finding the emeralds comes down to luck. There's nothing new or interesting here. The artificial chaos enemies are nothing but frustrating, and the level takes minutes to traverse just to get to the top one time. It's infuriating and poorly made. It's not nearly as bad as the best Tails stage, but it's certainly not good. I'd rather play that than any Tails stage again though. Most of the characters' fights are press attack to win, but the Rouge one is different. Not only is she tiny and thus difficult to find when the floor disappears, she can spam an attack that can hit you anywhere and just spawns on top of you. I don't understand this fight in the least. It's weird, confusing, and just compounds on why Meteor Herd sucks. Crazy Gadget is awful. Gravity Gimmick is confusing and controls weird. Mario Galaxy this is not. The level is far too long. It took me 6 minutes of real time without dying once after getting a game over at the very end to a weird camera because of the gravity. The drones randomly electrocuting is unfair, and you have to know it's coming. The artificial chaos is once again frustrating and bad. This is easily the worst Sonic stage in the game. The Eggman fight is bad and luck dependent and unfair, of course, another great Tails stage. Final Rush is surprisingly good after Crazy Gadget, focusing almost entirely on rail grinding. There were quite a few rails earlier in the game, sure, but I'm glad there's a stage focusing on it, even if the game doesn't quite explain how the grinding works to a T. I was able to figure it out, and it was kind of fun to do, especially when the puzzles, for lack of a better word, relied on momentum. It's weird that it's the final level, but it's still fun. The final boss being Shadow makes sense narratively, but it's really easy. All the character boss fights are, except for the last Eggman one. You just have to keep attacking and hope he doesn't jump at the exact moment you do. That's the hero story done with. Time to start Dark, I suppose. The Dark story opens up with Eggman, the Dark variant of mech gameplay. Having two stories you can start at any time is a double-edged sword. On one hand, you can have it be either a refresher, or keep them together on the same difficulty curve, whichever you want, but on the other hand, if you're playing the game as is most intuitive, going to the second story is a huge step down in difficulty, and it's weird to go back to not having any power-ups. It is a nice breather after Crazy Gadget the Eggman fight in Final Rush, but it's not what I expected to happen in the least. Either way, this Eggman stage isn't that bad. It's slow and tedious like all the others, but it's not frustrating. The doors you have to blow open are a good way to introduce the gameplay, but tedious beyond that, and since I've already played the hero story, it's just tedious. Hotshot is just worse Bigfoot. It uses essentially the same attacks plus a laser explosion, but it moves faster so it's harder to hit before it lands. This means more waiting for it to land, especially if the boxes break. Once it does land, if you don't immediately attack it, you pretty much just have to sit there waiting for the missiles to stop. If you attempt to attack it otherwise, it's impossible to dodge the missiles. The Oasis is a strange level. It's a Rouge level, but it's super small, seemingly smaller than Knuckles' first stage, but it's split into two separate areas. In order to travel between the two, you have to kill two robots around a random turtle, and then stand on the turtle and press the action button. It's unnecessarily convoluted, but it's an alright level once you know that. As for Eggman's next stage, once again I feel it's topical to mention that precision platforming does not work with this playstyle, especially without the hover power-up. Having to destroy the platforms to stand on them is once again a good way to introduce the gameplay, but otherwise tedious. Eggman's victory animation is great though. The first Shadow stage is fine, there's really nothing about it that stands out. It's engaging, but not frustrating. The camera sucks, but that's the whole game, so again, nothing really stands out. The next Rouge stage is just a better version of Knuckles stage with timers, because it doesn't have timers. You get the dig power up for Rouge here, but because of that you have to dig in places it really doesn't seem like you should be able to dig. The texture definitely should have been more obvious that it was diggable. The next Eggman stage is, surprisingly enough, pretty good. It's faster than most other mech stages, as platforming but not precision platforming. It makes decent use of the lock-on mechanic without any potential self-sabotage, and you get the hover power up so it's easier to control. There were a couple instances where elevators just didn't work or I had to walk into the camera, but again, jank doesn't bother me too much. The next Eggman stage is once again faster than most other mech stages, and you get the power up to break metal boxes here, which is much earlier than the Tails version of this upgrade. It's a fine level, despite the robots randomly coming from the sky and jank forcing me to the game over at the very end of the stage, so I had to do it all again. Other than that, average stage for this game, which is below average in general. I learned you can damage yourself with your homing energy ball attacks in the Tails fight, but aside from that it's super basic, same as your first Eggman fight in the hero story. The next Rouge stage is simple, but it introduces a timer gimmick, but this time it's for the whole stage rather than doors. You have 5 minutes to find all 3 Chaos Emeralds. It's plenty of time as long as you're not faffing around trying to figure out how to get up into a hole in the ceiling. The Flying Dog boss fight is easily the best variation of this boss, just because you don't have to wait if all the boxes get broken. This time it doesn't even land, just flies around and shoots lasers at you. This is how the boss should have been done to begin with, and maybe not reused so much. Shadow's version of the forest stage is better than Sonic's. It's significantly less janky, which means fewer unfair deaths. The time continuity is weird. If Shadow has 10 minutes until the island explodes before he gets to Sonic, then they fight. Why does Sonic have 8 whole minutes on his stage? The Sonic fight is exactly the same as the Shadow fight, but Omochao says something about lowering his defenses? As far as I can tell, you can just homing attack like normal. Nothing is different at all. The Rouge chase level is pretty similar to the Tails one, but you're in a much dumber looking car. Tails is also, like, red at the end of the level, instead of his normal yellow. Don't know what's up with that. Rail Canyon is far worse than its Sonic Heroes counterpart. Not only are the rail grinding mechanics worse, essentially just blind guessing the angle that you need to hold to speed up, but there are also points where the game just doesn't let you jump, so you need to know that you need to jump prior to that point. There are also several areas with floating spring platforms you need to homing attack to make go up, combined with enemies that shoot you from a distance, and sometimes you just need to get lucky with them. It's frustrating and unfair. That said, those are pretty sparse through the level, and this level as a whole is pretty fun. This variant of the Egg Golem fight is surprisingly fun. It's unique and interesting. Unfortunately, because of how the health breaks, you can kind of just sit there and spam attack until the weak point shows up, hit it, and win instantly. Actually trying to avoid the attacks is fun though. The stand at the bottom is instant death, unlike Sonic's version of the fight, but there are plenty of platforms down there, so it doesn't really matter if you know that. You kind of have to learn it the hard way, but it's a fine fight otherwise. Rouge's meteor level has a lot of the same issues as Knuckles. Too big, too open, too hard to find the emeralds, random meteors, all with the added bonus of terrible inverted gravity controls. This is also the level that I noticed Rouge's jiggle physics, and I can't unsee it now. Eggman's next level is pretty bad. It's slow, it has 2 auto-scroller sections, it's easy, it's just not fun. Plus precision platforming, which, say it with me now, doesn't work with this playstyle. The Tails fight that follows is the same as the final Eggman fight, same problem, same jank. The laser seemed easier to dodge in this version, but it might just be because I've played the game for a couple more hours at this point. Final Chase is much better than Crazy Gadget, but much worse than Final Rush. The spinning platforms is a much worse gimmick than the rails, they control terribly and they barely work half the time. It's almost impossible to attack enemies on them, and all the obstacles I avoided while on them were sheer luck. At least it's not too difficult to level, but it certainly outstayed its welcome. Luckily, the Sonic fight is just as easy as the Shadow fight, and that's a Dark Story complete. The final stage is fine, it's overly long, so getting a game over at the end would be infuriating, but it's easy enough that it's generally not an issue. I took 2 deaths during the Tails and Eggman segments because of the artificial chaos enemies, because of course it was them, and one to the Dead End Pit in Sonic section, but other than that I managed to avoid needless deaths. Going through every character in one stage is cool, aside from Shadow I guess, but he gets the boss fight so it counts. All of them using the same gimmick is nice too. The time freeze gimmick is really fun, and very thematically appropriate. I did completely forget about the bounce bracelet simply because you don't use it at all for most of the game, but I think that's more on me to be honest. The Bio-Lizard fight is finicky and weird, has strange hitboxes on the energy attack, and overly convoluted with the pipe grinding since you can only grind on the outside. Final Hazard on the other hand is incredible. Aside from the lasers are weird and inconsistent. Other than that, Super Sonic and Super Shadow is cool, Live and Learn is one of the best Sonic songs outright, and it's challenging but not too difficult. It's a perfect difficulty for a power trip, as it should be. I wasn't really able to let myself get invested in the Chao Garden, unfortunately. I really tried, but every time I visited was tedious and slow, just trying to feed the animals in tubes to my Chao, then feeding it a few fruit that it would constantly throw away. On top of that, there's the whole Chao Kindergarten thing that just adds an unnecessary amount of complexity to this simple gameplay. The entire point of the Chao Garden is replayability, so too simple wouldn't be good, but I feel as though taking out the Kindergarten as a whole, like the first game, is a perfect level of complexity. The races are silly and can be fun, but it's not worth grinding towards. If you're already playing the game anyway, sure, but I can't get myself to play more of this game for just the Chao Garden. Overall, I don't hate this game, it's fine. There's a lot wrong with it, and that's probably an understatement, but there's a lot wrong with a lot of games that I love. I love Sonic 06, and calling that a disaster is giving it undue credit. I would definitely come back to play this game again, eventually. I won't be replaying it countless times like I have with the first game, Heroes, Frontiers, or Colors DS, but I can definitely see myself coming back to enjoy it every now and again. That said, whether or not I'll beat it next time I play it is, well, we'll see. I'll probably get to a Tails or Eggman stage and just give up. If I persevere through those, though, Crazy Gadget will probably do me in. Either way, it's nice to have finally beaten such a quintessential Sonic game. The ending didn't make me emotional per se, but I was very happy having beaten it. The story is alright, it facilitates an adventure in plenty of different locations, though the first game was better about location diversity. The music certainly doesn't hurt. EGGMAN, A Ghost Pumpkin Soup, City Escape, Live and Learn, they're all incredible, some of my favorite music outright. As a whole, I think I'll give it an 8 out of 10, I think. Playable, it's Sonic, so that's a plus, and incredible music, plus it's really funny to try and seriously watch the cutscenes. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, I love you all. I think the next game I'm going to do is one that I've already played, probably either Sonic Adventure 1, maybe Sonic Heroes, we'll see, I haven't played either of those in a pretty long time. I don't know how to end this.